The night my father didn't show up to my wedding was the first time I truly understood how long someone can control your life without ever raising their voice. People think betrayal is loud, screaming, slamming doors, ugly words thrown across rooms. But the most damaging betrayals happen quietly, dressed up as concern, love, and knowing what's best for you. I didn't learn that until I stood at the end of the aisle, music fading, guests rising from their seats, and instinctively scanning the crowd for one face that wasn't there. My father's. At first, I told myself there was a mistake. Maybe traffic. Maybe his phone died. Maybe he was having one of those sudden dizzy spells he complained about recently. My mother squeezed my arm and whispered that everything was fine, her smile tight and rehearsed. She said he wasn't feeling well and didn't want to ruin my day. That should have been enough. But something inside me felt wrong. Not anxious, not sad. Wrong. Like a piece of the picture had been deliberately removed. The ceremony went on. I said my vows. My partner smiled at me with that look that says, "We're okay, whatever happens." People clapped. Cameras flashed. My life moved forward on schedule, but part of me stayed frozen in that moment, staring at an empty chair in the second row. At the reception, everyone danced. Everyone laughed. Everyone avoided mentioning my father. That silence was louder than any excuse. An hour in, I slipped outside under the excuse of needing air. The night was cool, the venue lights glowing behind me like a different world. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. No missed calls. No explanation. Just one thing I hadn't noticed before. A notification from earlier that evening. A message preview from my father that now showed as unsent. I can't watch this happen. That was it. No punctuación. No follow-up. Just a sentence heavy enough to crack something open inside me. I didn't tell anyone. I put my phone away, pasted on a smile, and finished the night the way you're supposed to. When people hugged me and said how lucky I was, I nodded and thanked them. When my mother finally sat down beside me and said, "He loves you," you know that I said nothing, because love shouldn't feel like absence. A week later, after the guests had gone home and the photos were already posted online, I drove to my parents' house alone. I didn't announce it. I didn't call ahead. I just showed up like I had 100 times before, expecting the same house, the same routines, the same carefully maintained peace. My father wasn't home. My mother said he'd gone for a walk. That was new. He hated walking. I nodded and went upstairs, telling her I needed to grab something from my old room. She hesitated for half a second before agreeing. I noticed. I always notice things like that. My childhood bedroom was exactly as I'd left it years ago. Same faded posters, same bookshelf, same desk shoved against the wall under the window. My mother had always said she kept it that way, so I'd never feel like a guest. Back then, I thought it was sweet. Now it felt staged. I sat on the bed and let the quiet settle. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I didn't even know why I'd come. Maybe I just needed to feel grounded somewhere that used to feel safe. That's why I noticed the desk drawer didn't open all the way. At first, I assumed something had fallen behind it. A pencil, a notebook. I tugged harder. It stopped short again. When I knelt down and looked underneath, I saw the edge of a manila folder jammed behind it. My stomach tightened before I even touched it. The folder was thick, overstuffed, the kind you don't accidentally forget about. Inside were papers that changed the way I understood my entire life. College acceptance letters addressed to me. Scholarship offers with my name spelled perfectly. Internship confirmations from cities I dreamed about living in. Emails printed out, stapled together, all addressed to my father, thanking him for passing along the message or responding on her behalf. I sat on the floor, papers spread around me, heart pounding so hard it felt unreal. Every rejection I remembered crying over suddenly felt staged. Every time my father had said, "It just wasn't meant to be," echoed differently now. He hadn't been comforting me. He'd been deciding for me. I thought back to all the arguments we'd had over the years. How he always discouraged me from moving too far away. How he framed it as concern. Safety. Family values. I remembered how proud he sounded when I chose a local college instead of pushing harder for something bigger. He hadn't been proud. He'd been relieved. I didn't confront him that day. I couldn't. I packed the folder back where it was and closed the drawer. When my mother called me down for tea, I went. We talked about nothing. Weather, neighbors, wedding photos. She never asked why I stayed longer than usual. That night, I barely slept. Memories rearranged themselves in my head, taking on new shapes. Every missed opportunity, every practical decision, every moment I'd blamed myself for not being ambitious enough. It hadn't been a lack of ambition. It had been supervision. I waited 3 days before confronting my father. I needed to know whether he'd deny it, whether I was about to lose my mind, or finally confirm something I've been afraid to name. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Same table where he'd helped me with homework. Same chair where he'd lectured me about responsibility. Same calm expression on his face. I put the folder between us. He didn't look surprised. That was the worst part. He sighed, leaned back, and said my name the way parents do when they think you're being unreasonable. Slowly, carefully, as if calming a child. I did what I thought was right. Those words landed harder than any confession could have. I asked him how long. He said it started when I was 17. He said I was too eager to leave. He said families fall apart when kids scatter too far. He said he didn't want to lose me. I asked him why he didn't trust me to decide for myself. He looked genuinely confused by the question. Parents don't let children make choices that destroy families, he said. That's when I realized he didn't see what he'd done as control. He saw it as protection. I stood up, hands shaking, and asked him one last thing. Why he didn't come to my wedding. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, I couldn't watch you choose a life I didn't approve of. There it was. Honest, unfiltered, devastating. I left without yelling, without crying, without slamming the door. I drove home and sat in my car for nearly an hour, staring at nothing, wondering how many versions of my life I'd never get to meet. That night, I understood something painful and freeing. Some parents don't raise children to grow. They raise them to stay. And sometimes, the hardest part of becoming yourself is accepting that someone who loves you may never forgive you for doing it. I didn't tell anyone for a while after that confrontation. I didn't even tell my husband. I walked around in this strange quiet, like my whole world had lost its background noise. Every thought I had came with an echo of doubt now. Every decision I'd ever made, I questioned whether it had actually been mine. I tried to keep living normally, go to work, cook dinner, laugh at the right times. But every time my phone buzzed, I flinched, expecting my father's name to pop up. It never did. My mother called instead. Her voice was soft, too soft, like she was walking on a frozen lake that could crack at any second. Your father misses you, she said. He didn't mean to hurt you. You know how he is. I didn't respond, because I didn't know how he was. That was the problem. She sighed, waiting for me to fill the silence, then added, he thinks you hate him. I wanted to scream that I didn't hate him. I wanted to tell her that I just didn't recognize him anymore. But I stayed quiet, and after a long pause, she whispered, families shouldn't fight like this. That line hit harder than I expected. It was something my father used to say whenever I disagreed with him growing up. Families shouldn't fight like this. I used to believe it meant love. Now I understood it was a way of saying, stop asking questions. Over the next few weeks, I noticed something else. My mother's texts became shorter, more careful. She stopped calling altogether. The distance grew like a shadow that didn't stop stretching. Then, one afternoon, she showed up at my door. I hadn't seen her since the wedding. She looked smaller, somehow. Her hair was pinned too neatly. Her face painted with that practice calm she always wore when things were falling apart. She brought food. Of course she did. My mother solved everything with food. We sat at the kitchen table, the smell of her homemade curry filling the air. For a moment, it felt like we were back in the old rhythm of comfort and denial. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a thick white envelope. From your father, she said, placing it between us. I stared at it, but didn't touch it. What is it? She hesitated. Letters. He wrote them to you over the years. He thought, maybe if you read them, you'd understand. I didn't move. I didn't want to open them because I already knew what they'd say. I'd grown up reading between his words my whole life. But later that night, I couldn't resist. I sat on the couch, opened the first one, and started reading. They weren't apologies. They were justifications. Each letter was dated, years apart, written after moments of my life I thought had been my choices. Why I decided not to go to that journalism internship in Chicago. When I dropped out of the out-of-state grad program. When I stayed home to help my mom. Every one of those moments have been shaped by something he said, some fear he planted, and each letter explained why he'd done it. He wrote about keeping the family close, about protecting me from failure, about saving me from loneliness. But what struck me most were the endings of each letter. Every single one ended with the same line. One day you'll thank me for this. I sat there until the ink started blurring from my tears. Not because I missed him, because I finally realized how deep his control ran. It wasn't just my future he'd taken. It was the story of my life, rewritten to make him the hero. When my husband came home, I showed him the letters. He didn't say much, just sat beside me, reading quietly, his expression changing from confusion to disbelief to anger. Finally, he said, "You know this isn't your fault, right?" I nodded, but inside I wasn't sure. Because how do you separate yourself from a story you've been living in since birth? That night, I dreamed about being 17 again. I saw myself sitting on the porch with my dad, watching the rain. He'd said something like, "You're too smart for your own good, kiddo. Don't let the world eat you alive." Back then, I thought it was love. Now it felt like a warning. A few days later, my mother called again. Her voice cracked as soon as I answered. "He's not well," she said. "He collapsed yesterday." My chest tightened, and before I could stop myself, I was in the car, driving back to the same house I swore I wouldn't return to. At the hospital, I found him asleep, his face pale and drawn. He looked old, smaller, mortal. I stood by his bed, my emotions tangled. Anger, sadness, guilt, love, all fighting for space. When he opened his eyes and saw me, he smiled faintly. "You came." "Of course I came," I said softly. He nodded, eyes glistening. "I didn't mean to ruin things. I just didn't want to lose you." There was again the same justification, the same script. I took his hand, and for the first time, I didn't feel the same connection. I just felt tired. "I'm not lost, Dad," I whispered. "You just have to stop pretending you own me." He blinked slowly, a tear sliding down his cheek. "You were always mine to protect." "No," I said gently. "I was yours to love. You confused the two." We didn't say much after that. The machines kept beeping. The clock kept ticking. I stayed a few hours, then left without saying goodbye, because there wasn't anything left to say. 2 weeks later, he passed away quietly in his sleep. The funeral was small. People came up to me saying how proud he'd been of me, how he'd always talked about his brilliant daughter. I nodded and smiled like I was supposed to. When it was over, my mother and I sat alone in the empty living room. She finally spoke. He wasn't perfect, but he loved us in his own way. I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her differently. Not as a victim or accomplice, but as someone who'd spent her entire life under the same quiet control I had. "Do you ever wish things had been different?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, she said, "Every single day." That night, I went back to my own home and sat by the window, holding one of the letters. I didn't read it. I didn't need to. Instead, I wrote one of my own. It wasn't a goodbye. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a declaration. "Dad, you taught me how to be afraid of losing people. But I'm learning now that love isn't meant to trap. It's meant to free. For the first time, I'm choosing my own life. And I hope, wherever you are, you finally understand what that means." I folded it and tucked it inside the same folder that had once held all those stolen letters. And when I closed that drawer, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The kind that doesn't need anyone's permission. Now, months later, I'm rebuilding slowly. My mother visits sometimes, and we talk more openly than we ever did before. It's awkward, but it's real. I don't hate my father anymore. I don't even resent him. I just understand him now. And sometimes that's even harder, because understanding someone doesn't erase the damage they've done. It just helps you see the shape of it more clearly. I've learned that families can love you deeply and still harm you quietly. That protection can feel like a cage when it's built from someone else's fear. And most importantly, I've learned that you can walk away without hating anyone, just finally choosing yourself. So if you've ever had a parent, a partner, or anyone who made you feel like your choices didn't belong to you, I hope you remember this. You're allowed to rewrite your story. You're allowed to love them, but still leave. And you're allowed to build a life they'd never have let you dream of. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't anger. It's freedom. If you've ever been through something like this, where love felt like control, comment your thoughts below. I really want to hear your story. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because more people need to hear stories like this one. The first sign something was wrong wasn't the money. It wasn't the lies either. It was the way my sister stopped looking me in the eyes. We grew up inseparable. Same room, same secrets, same late night talks under blankets when everyone else was asleep. If you'd asked me back then who I trusted more than anyone in the world, I wouldn't have said my parents. I would have said her without hesitation. That's why it took me years to realize she'd been quietly dismantling my life piece by piece. It started small, so small that I brushed it off as stress, jealousy, coincidence, anything except what it actually was. I was the older sibling, the responsible one, the one who worked early, paid bills on time, helped our parents when money got tight. My sister was the dreamer, emotional, always in some kind of trouble, but somehow landing on her feet. Growing up, I protected her, fought her battles, took the blame when she messed up. I thought that's what love looked like. After college, I got a stable job. Nothing flashy, but enough to live comfortably and save. My sister bounced between jobs, relationships, ideas. Every few months, she had a new crisis. Can you help me just this once? I swear I'll pay you back. You're the only one I can rely on. And I did help. Again and again. Rent money, phone bills, emergency loans that were never emergencies. I told myself she just needed time. What I didn't see was how comfortable she was becoming with my sacrifices. The real shift happened when she moved closer to me. She said she wanted a fresh start, said she admired my stability and wanted to learn from me. That should have been my first red flag. Suddenly, she knew everyone in my life. My friends, my coworkers, even my neighbors. She inserted herself into conversations she didn't belong in, laughed a little too loud at my jokes, shared stories about my childhood I'd never told anyone. People loved her. She was charming, vulnerable, funny. I was proud at first. Thought, wow, she's finally finding her place. But slowly, I started noticing changes. Friends would repeat things I'd supposedly said, things I never remembered saying. Co-workers became distant. Invitations stopped coming as often. When I asked what was wrong, people would hesitate, then say something vague like, I didn't know you felt that way. Felt what way? I brushed it off. Stress, miscommunication, life. Then came a job incident. I'd been up for a promotion. I'd worked toward it for years. My manager had hinted it was practically mine. The raise would have changed everything. The day before the decision, HR called me in. They slid a folder across the table. Inside were screenshots, messages, emails, all supposedly from me, complaints about coworkers, accusations, personal attacks, things that painted me as unstable, bitter, unprofessional. I felt sick. I never wrote this, I said immediately. My voice was shaking. Someone's pretending to be me. HR exchanged looks. The emails came from your personal account. I left that office numb. The promotion was gone. My reputation was damaged. People looked at me differently overnight. That evening, my sister came over with takeout like nothing had happened. She watched me push food around my plate, eyes studying me too closely. You okay? She asked, overly gentle. I told her everything, because she was my sister, because I trusted her. She hugged me and whispered, "I'm so sorry. You don't deserve this." For a moment, I felt relief. I didn't know she was the reason it happened. The unraveling didn't happen all at once. It never does. It happens in quiet realizations, late at night, when things stop adding up. I started checking details, dates, times, emails sent while I was asleep, messages written in a tone that wasn't quite mine, but close enough to pass. And then I noticed something chilling. The phrasing matched her voice. Little expressions she used. Complaints she made about my coworkers in private. Grievances I'd vented to her in confidence. I told myself I was being paranoid. That grief and stress were messing with my head. Until one night, I overheard her on the phone. She was in my living room, thinking I was asleep, laughing softly. "I told you it would work," she said. "They believe anything if it sounds emotional enough." My heart started pounding. "I didn't even have to lie much," she continued. "I just used her words." She practically handed me everything. I stood frozen in the hallway, my entire body buzzing. She was talking about me. I waited until she left, then sat on the floor for hours replaying everything in my head. Every accidental comment she'd made to my friends. Every time she'd asked specific questions about my work. Every crisis that somehow ended with me losing something. The next day, I checked my email security logs. There it was. Multiple logins. From her device. From her location. I felt something break inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet snap. Like a thread that had been holding my life together finally gave up. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to be sure. I needed to understand how deep it went. So I watched. I listened. And what I uncovered over the next few weeks was worse than betrayal. She hadn't just sabotaged my job. She'd been telling people I was controlling, that I used money to manipulate her, that I'd threatened to cut her off if she didn't do what I wanted. She turned herself into the victim and me into the villain. Friends I'd known for years believed her. Even our parents started treating me differently, more cautious, more distant. When I finally confronted her, I expected denial, tears, anger. Instead, she looked relieved. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," she said calmly. I stared at her, barely recognizing the person in front of me. "Why?" was all I could ask. She shrugged. "You had everything. I had nothing. It wasn't fair." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it crushed me. "You took my life because you felt insecure," I said. She crossed her arms. "You were always the favorite, always the successful one. I just leveled the playing field." That's when I understood something terrifying. She didn't see what she'd done as wrong. She saw it as justice. I asked her if she felt guilty. She tilted her head and said, "A little. But you're strong. You'll recover. You always do." That sentence hurt more than everything else combined. Because she was right. I always had recovered. And she had built her entire identity around that fact. I told her to leave. She did without protest. Almost like she'd been waiting for it. That night, I sat alone in the silence she left behind and realized my life had been quietly redirected by someone who claimed to love me. I wasn't just mourning my job. I was mourning the sister I thought I had. And the worst part? This was only the beginning of what her actions would cost me. I thought confronting her would give me closure. It didn't. What gave me instead was clarity. And clarity is dangerous when someone has been quietly feeding on your life. For a few days after she left, I did nothing. I went to work like a ghost, ignored messages, let rumors harden into truth behind my back. I needed space to feel everything without reacting. Anger, grief, disbelief, shame. The shame was the worst. Not because of what she did, but because of how long I let it happen. Every time I replayed our childhood, the signs were there. The jealousy masked as jokes. The way she'd cry whenever attention shifted away from her. How she learned early that playing fragile made people rush to protect her. I'd been her shield, and shields don't realize they're being worn down until they crack. One evening, my mother called. Her voice was cautious, measured, like she was walking across thin ice. "Your sister says you kicked her out," she said. I closed my eyes. "She sabotaged my job," I replied calmly. "She stole my identity. She lied about me to everyone." There was a pause. Then, "She says you're exaggerating." That's when I realized the war wasn't just between me and my sister anymore. It was between truth and the version of reality she'd been carefully planting for years. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I told my mother I loved her and hung up. That night, I made a decision that changed everything. If I was going to lose relationships, I wasn't going to lose them quietly. I started documenting everything. Screenshots, look in histories, messages she'd sent pretending to be me, voice recordings from past arguments where she'd slipped up and admitted things she thought I'd forgotten. I cross-referenced dates with events at work, built timelines, patterns. It wasn't revenge at first. It was survival. But the deeper I went, the uglier it got. I found emails she'd sent to my manager months before the HR incident. Subtle ones, concerned ones, planting seeds about my mental health and stress levels. I found messages to mutual friends where she twisted private conversations into narratives that made her look trapped and me look cruel. She hadn't just reacted impulsively. She planned this. And suddenly, my sadness hardened into something else. Resolve. I requested a meeting with HR again. This time, I didn't go in pleading. I went in prepared. I laid everything out. Calmly. Methodically. No emotion. The logins. The IP addresses. The phrasing analysis. The timeline. Silence filled the room. One of the HR reps finally said, "We didn't realize this was possible." 2 weeks later, I got a call. They couldn't undo the damage entirely, but they issued a formal correction. My record was cleared. My manager apologized. The promotion wasn't immediately reinstated, but the door reopened. It felt like a victory, but victories don't heal family wounds. My sister found out within days. She showed up unannounced. I opened the door and barely recognized her. Her confidence was gone, replaced with panic. "You went behind my back," she snapped. I almost laughed. "You went behind my life," I said quietly. She tried to cry, tried to soften. When that didn't work, she got angry. "You think you're so perfect," she yelled. "Everyone always chooses you." I shook my head. "No, I chose you. Over and over. And you used that." She stared at me like she'd never seen me before. "Do you know what you did?" I asked. "You didn't just hurt me. You taught me that loving you means disappearing." That stopped her. For the first time, she looked small, not vulnerable, but exposed. "You're ruining my life," she whispered. I leaned against the doorframe. "You ruined mine first. I'm just not letting you keep doing it." She left screaming, calling me selfish, heartless, ungrateful, and something strange happened when the door closed behind her. I felt lighter. The fallout wasn't instant. It rippled. Friends reached out slowly, cautiously, apologizing. Some admitted they believed her because she seemed so hurt. Others stayed silent, unwilling to admit they'd chosen the wrong side. Our parents were the hardest. They wanted peace, balance, neutrality. "There are two sides," my father said once. "No, Arabia. There's truth and there's convenience." They didn't like that answer. So I stepped back. Months passed. My career stabilized. My confidence returned. I learned how much energy I'd been spending managing someone else's emotions instead of building my own life. Then, one day, I got a message from someone unexpected. My sister's former friend. She apologized. Said she couldn't stay silent anymore. Said my sister had done the same thing to her. Manipulated, lied, turned people against her. "You weren't the first," she wrote. "Just the longest." That confirmation hurt more than it healed. It meant my suffering wasn't unique, but it also meant it was preventable if I trusted my instincts earlier. The final confrontation didn't happen face to face. It happened quietly. At a family gathering I chose not to attend. My sister tried to repeat her narrative, and this time it didn't work. Too many cracks. Too many inconsistencies. Too many people remembering moments that didn't add up. I wasn't there, but the truth was. She stopped calling after that. Blocked me everywhere. Some might see that as a loss. I saw it as freedom. Because the hardest truth I learned wasn't that my sister betrayed me. It was that loyalty without boundaries is self-destruction. And love that requires silence isn't love at all. I don't hate her, but I don't miss her either. And if there's one thing I know now, it's this. Blood can make you related, but it doesn't make you safe. If you were in my place, would you have exposed everything publicly or walked away like I did? Tell me what you do in the comments. And if this story hit you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. I read everyone. I found the envelope by accident. That's the part that still makes my stomach twist because nothing in my life was supposed to change that afternoon. It was wedged behind the old property papers in my father's cupboard, yellowed and bent like it had been hidden in a hurry. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for the electricity bill because my name was suddenly missing from the ownership records of the municipal office, and the clerk had casually said, "Sir, according to our system, this house was transferred years ago." Transferred? Years ago? I laughed at first. This house was my childhood, my parents' entire savings. The place where my name was painted on the wall in pencil when I was 5. There was no transfer. There couldn't be. But when I opened that envelope, the laughter drained out of me so fast it felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. Inside was a notarized document dated almost 9 years back. My father's signature, my mother's signature, and the name of the new owner. My older brother. Not gifted, not shared, sole owner. I sat on the floor for a long time, reading it again and again, waiting for the letters to rearrange themselves into something that didn't mean what they clearly meant. They had signed away the house. Not recently, not secretly yesterday, but years ago while I was still living there, while I was paying bills, while I was being told over and over, "This is your home too." Suddenly, every strange argument from the past came rushing back with new meaning. The way my brother would snap when I suggested renovations. The time he told me, half joking, "You act like you own the place." The moment my father shut down a conversation about splitting assets equally, saying, "We'll talk about it later." Later had already happened, and I wasn't invited. That night, I didn't confront anyone. I watched them. My mother cooked dinner like nothing was wrong. My father complained about the news. My brother sat across from me, scrolling on his phone, perfectly relaxed in a house he legally owned while I still thought it belonged to all of us. I felt like the stupidest person alive. After dinner, my brother casually mentioned he was thinking of renting out the top floor. I looked up slowly. Renting it out to who? He shrugged. Anyone. Extra income, you know. My father nodded along. Good idea. Property should work for you. I swear in that moment, something inside me cracked. You're renting out my room? I asked. My brother didn't even look guilty. You're not living here full-time anymore. I turned to my parents. You're okay with this? My mother avoided my eyes. My father cleared his throat. That room isn't yours, he said. Not legally. Silence swallowed the room. Since when? I asked quietly. No one answered. That was the first time I realized the betrayal wasn't just paperwork. It was practiced, rehearsed. Everyone in that room had known the truth long before I did. Later that night, my mother came into my room, closing the door softly like she used to when I was a child. You shouldn't have found those papers, she said. No, I'm sorry. No, we should have told you. Just that. Why didn't you? I asked. She sat on the bed, folding her hands. Your brother needed stability. He was married. You were independent. Independent. The word tasted bitter. So, you decided I didn't need a home? I said, we thought you'd understand, she whispered. That's when the anger finally hit. You didn't even ask me, I said. You didn't tell me. You let me believe I was building something here. My father joined us then, already defensive. This isn't about love, he said. It's practical. One child, one house. Less conflict. I laughed, sharp and ugly. You created the conflict. My brother appeared at the door, arms crossed. Stop acting like a victim, he said. You still lived here for free. Free. I had paid utilities, repairs, groceries. I had postponed moving abroad because my parents said they needed me close. And all that time, I was a guest who didn't know the lease was imaginary. That night, I slept fully dressed, like I might be asked to leave at any moment. Over the next few weeks, things got worse in quiet, calculated ways. My brother changed the locks for security. My father started reminding me how long I'd been staying. My mother suggested I look for a place of my own. They didn't kick me out. They nudged me, and that hurt more, because every nudge said the same thing. You were never meant to stay. I moved out without a fight, packed my things while they were at work, left my keys on the dining table, took nothing that could be called shared. As I was leaving, I paused in the doorway, looking at the walls where my childhood height marks still faintly showed. I realized something then. They hadn't just given my brother the house. They had rewritten the family story, so I was never supposed to belong to it. I thought distance would help. It didn't, because once you see how easily people you love can erase you, you start questioning everything they ever told you. And that was only the beginning, because months later, I learned why they really did it. And when the truth finally came out, it didn't just explain the betrayal. It made it unforgivable. What would you have done if you found out your own family secretly erased you like this? Do you think I was wrong for leaving without a fight? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. And if stories like this keep you hooked till the end, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. I didn't leave the house that night. I sat in my car with the engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles hurt, staring at the dark windows of the place I grew up believing was safe. Every light was off except the one in the kitchen. My mother was still awake. I could picture her exactly how she always stood when she thought she was right, arms crossed, chin lifted, waiting for the storm to pass so life could go back to normal. Except this time, nothing was normal anymore. I didn't cry. That came later. Right then, all I felt was this hollow pressure in my chest, like someone had scooped something essential out of me and left nothing behind. I kept replaying her words. Not what she said, but how easily she said it. Like she'd been holding it in for years, just waiting for the moment she didn't have to pretend anymore. You were never supposed to know. That sentence kept echoing. I finally drove. No destination, just movement. Streetlights blurred past as memories stacked on top of each other. Every moment from my childhood suddenly feeling suspicious. The times I wasn't invited to things. The way my brother always got a second chance. The quiet conversations that stopped when I entered the room. I had always blamed myself for feeling like an outsider. Turns out, I was one by design. I didn't go home. I parked outside a grocery store and slept in the car for maybe an hour, maybe none at all. When my phone buzzed at sunrise, it was a text from my brother. She didn't mean it like that. I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound that startled me. Didn't mean it like what? Like erasing me? Like lying to my face for decades? Like choosing everyone else over me every single time? I didn't reply. By noon, the messages started coming faster. My aunt, my cousin, even my dad, who hadn't spoken more than 5 words to me in years. You should come talk this out. Family is family. She's your mother. No one asked if I was okay. No one asked what it felt like to find out your entire life was built on a lie everyone else agreed to keep from you. They just wanted me back in line, quiet, forgiving, convenient. I turned my phone off. The next few days passed in a strange fog. I stayed with a friend who didn't ask questions, just handed me a blanket and let me exist. At night, the anger finally came. Not explosive rage, but something colder. Calculated. The kind that makes you see things clearly. I realized something uncomfortable. My family hadn't just lied. They had made choices. Over and over again. Every holiday, seating arrangement. Every decision about money. Every time, they defended my brother when he messed up and expected me to be understanding. They didn't drift into treating me differently. They planned it. And suddenly, I didn't want explanations anymore. I wanted truth. All of it. So I did something I'd never done before. I asked for records. birth certificates, legal documents, old emails, anything that existed before I was old enough to remember. It took some digging, some awkward phone calls, but eventually pieces started falling into place. My mother had been pressured into keeping me. My father had agreed to stay only if certain boundaries were drawn. Boundaries that conveniently placed me just outside the circle of what mattered. I wasn't the mistake. I was the compromise. When I finally confronted them again, it wasn't emotional. It was quiet. I sat across from my parents at the same kitchen table where I'd done homework as a kid, where I'd celebrated birthdays, where I'd believed in something that never really existed. My mother cried. My father stared at the table. I told them I knew everything. There were excuses. There always are. We thought it was better this way. We didn't want to hurt you. We were protecting the family. I asked one question. Who was protecting me? No one answered. That silence did something permanent. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I simply told them I was done pretending. That I wouldn't play the role they assigned me anymore. That I needed space, and this time, it wasn't temporary. My mother panicked then. Promises spilled out. Therapy. Family dinners. Fresh starts. The same thing she'd never offered before I had one foot out the door. Too late. I left with a calm I didn't recognize. Like something inside me had finally accepted the truth. It wasn't closure. It was clarity. The months that followed were brutal in quieter ways. Grief sneaks up on you when you least expect it. A song in a store. A family laughing in public. Even commercials hit differently when you realize how much you lost without knowing it. But something else grew alongside the grief. Strength. Independence. The strange relief of no longer begging for a place you were never meant to occupy. I stopped responding to guilt-masked concern. I built routines that didn't include them. I learned who I was when I wasn't trying to earn love that came with conditions. One night, my brother showed up unannounced. He looked smaller somehow, less certain. He said he didn't know how bad it was, that he never meant to benefit from it, that he missed me. I believed him, and I still told him no, because understanding doesn't undo damage. Love doesn't automatically grant access, and sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is to stop explaining yourself to people who already decided who you were without asking. Walking away didn't make me heartless. It made me honest. I don't hate my family. I just don't belong to the version of them that only works when I stay quiet. And for the first time in my life, I'm okay with that. What would you have done if you discovered your own family quietly rewrote your place in it for years? Do you think walking away was the right choice? Or should blood always come first? Share your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely read them. And if these stories keep you listening till the very end, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one.